Welcome back. We're continuing our focus looking ahead of the general elections. Dr. Emmanuel Onah joins us this morning. He's a political scientist. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's start off with this perspective that the EU is bringing to the equation, because you have observed elections before. Perhaps you could also identify with their situation, but does that mean anything, whether they can go observe elections in the Northeast or not, in terms of its perhaps effects or perception about the elections in the Northeast?
Well, I think that ultimately elections are about the people, the electorate in a particular country. Ultimately, how elections go, whether they are credible or not, is about the people who are voting and for whom the elections are being conducted. Observers are outsiders, especially in the case of EU or some other foreign bodies. They are outsiders, so that ultimately they are not the people who will determine how the elections have gone. In this particular case, it is unfortunate that the EU is taking this position, because the elections, these particular elections, promise to be interesting. In fact, I think that everything has been moving on well, and I thought that the observers would also be part of it, totally, so that in the end, there won't be any question about credibility, there won't be any question about doubts, as to how the elections were. But then, I can understand their plight, As I say, these are foreigners. Their stake is not so much as the stake of Nigerians and Nigeria in this election. So it is understandable that they would like to put their citizens, they would like to put their people in any difficult situation. But then I thought that what they would have done in this circumstance would be to look for volunteers, even within Nigeria, who will be like their correspondent observers.
Yeah, that's part of what they said they'll adopt, they'll work on. But the fact that they're talking about not going there for security reasons, does that raise any red flag for us to also take a look at? Because, we also have local observers here. What if they cite the same reason?
The situation in the Northeast, to tell you the truth, is something that we are not really clear about. Personally, I'm not clear about, because each time the government talks, each time some of the parties talk, it is as if nothing much is happening there. But then the indications don't give that, don't follow that line, So that why the government, why the military is telling us that, things are normal, some of the people who should know, including the EU, because the EU, even though they are not from here, they have a whole lot of information available to them. And if they are saying that they cannot go there, that cannot be taken lightly. That means that there is something that we don't know that some other people know about the Northeast region. And I think that the earlier all the people concerned, the authorities come out clear on this, the better for all of us. Because if we insist, for instance, on going on with the elections in that place, and then something untoward happens, it could then the image of the entire elections. So that if we have all the facts available to us, then it will be possible for Nigerians, to take a decision as to what will happen with that. With the Northeast, with the vote in the Northeast. Right now it is like we don't have all the facts.
Well, Dr. Onah, the way it's going, you have talked about credibility issue. You've also talked about the fear of this particular process not being compromised by a singular region. What do we do in the case where we've also had representatives from that particular region say, well, elections can hold in some parts, but not every part of that particular Northeast region. And we're getting to hear this from the observation team from the EU. What can be done so that we have a process that wouldn't be scattered by that particular region?
Yeah, I think that in the next 1 week or so, the INEC, the military authorities, and the federal government and the state governments involved should really take some serious action in terms of, getting to know the true situation in the place. If they get to know the true position of the place, in the place, they will be able to really determine certain things. For instance, how many local governments, what are those areas of the Northeast that the elections can hold? Because we know that there are constitutional provisions about validity of elections in terms of geographical spread. If we can get to know exactly where elections can hold, then we can now calculate the percentage of these places, the percentage of the total that we can now hold elections, and know whether if we hold elections in those areas, it could satisfy the constitutional requirements for a valid election. For instance, if we go and hold elections in a particular state in less than the required number of local governments, it doesn't make sense, because ultimately it will not satisfy anything.
Well, some people say that would only matter mostly for the governorship election in the case where the governor has to fulfill 2/3 of the state that is going to be governed. But for the presidential election, what is important is that elections do hold in that area to satisfy the 2/3 of the federation. Do you agree with them?
Well, I think it is much more obvious in the case of the governorship election. But we also know that in the presidential election, for instance, a winning presidential candidate needs to get 25% of the votes in a number of states. In a situation where the election is tight, for instance, and a presidential candidate needs one of the states from the Northeast to make up his electoral requirements, and then we can now prove mathematically that what is going for 25% may not exactly be 25% because ab initio the entire state was not covered. We could now get to a situation where mathematicians will come in, like in 1979, when we were talking about 12 to 10, because such a situation could actually arise.